History and tragedy, two genres that were very appreciated in ancient Greece. History was considered magister vitae according to the Romans, that is, the master, the teacher of life. Whoever understands the historical, social events of a people would be able to suggest, to advise about their policies, about their future. Aristotle had also said that history is supposed to tell things as they happen, while poetry is supposed to tell things as they should happen. This difference between history and poetry is the first foundation to separate two very important discursive genres. One that is scientific, that is objective, that is factual, history. The other that is imaginative, creative, fictional. However, poetry can also aim at some kind of truth that would reveal from the imagined situation, from the events. Think of the Iliad or the Odyssey, which are the models of poetry for Aristotle in his book Poetics. In history, however, three figures like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Xenophon are pivotal to understand the development of this genre in ancient Greece. Herodotus was basically an explorer of other cultures. He wrote about the Persian Wars. He was very involved with finding out the habits, the mentality of the Persians and other strange people, people who were beyond the limits of what was called at that point civilization, considering Athens as the center, the core of that way of being. So Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century of BC, before our era, was a contemporary of Pericles, was also a well-regarded writer, was followed by Thucydides, who also wrote about the Peloponnesian Wars, but was more scientific, more systematic in his documentation of facts. He was considered one of the fathers of history because of his rigor in the way in which he proved the stories that he told in his prose. The other important historian, Xenophon, is also a very interesting case, particularly because he was, just as Plato, a disciple of Socrates. Xenophon wrote an apology of Socrates. He is one of the sources, together with Plato, to know about Socrates, who, as we said, didn't write a single line. And he also wrote, Xenophon, many accounts of the Peloponnesian Wars. In some way, the Peloponnesian Wars are the wars between the Spartans and the Athenians, no? These two important state cities of the Greek peninsula. And Xenophon also devoted himself to write a history of the Persian succession in his book Anabasis, which is a wonderful account of events in a culture that is observed from a Greek standpoint. So with these three names, Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, we have a basic idea of the origins of Western history. History is not just scientific, it also has to be artistic, has to be well narrated, and has to seduce the reader in order to convince the public about transcendental general truths that the historian is trying to convey. Aristotle also referred, as one of the two poetic genres, to tragedy. Here we see a classic Anthea Theatre, because it's half a circle, it's a semicircle on the side, on the slope of a hill. Athenians, Greeks in general, enjoyed very much seeing representations of life, but they were not realistic representations of life. They usually presented fictional characters, legendary characters, in different formats. One of the most important, and probably considered the father of Greek tragedy, is Aeschylus. This is not a portrait of Aeschylus, but a mask that was used in most representations called a persona. Actors who were basically men used this mask in order to express fear, anger, happiness, whatever their character was characterized for. And Aeschylus, who lived between the 6th and the 5th centuries, wrote trilogies of the kind of, for example, of the Aristiad, the trilogy of Orestes. In all his tragedies, he basically proposed that it was inevitable to escape the will of the gods. He was very respectful of religion, and he was also a great devote of what is called the fate, the destiny that the gods have written for us. Prometheus Bound is another one of his important plays, and together with the other two playwrights that we're going to mention, all of them, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, this is the triad of great playwrights from ancient Greece, they conceived tragedy as a process of discovery. Aristotle also had talked about the pathetic appearance, the pathetic revelation, the pathos, something that is underneath the actions of every man or woman. This is the purpose of tragedy, to reveal not only our destiny, but the reasons why we are chained to some kind of behavior or some kind of fate. So after Aeschylus, Sophocles, probably the most famous one, his play Oedipus Rex is the account of a prince, Oedipus, who is predicted to kill his father and marry his mother. Even at that time, there was a horrendous idea. Patricide, incest, that doesn't sound very civilized. That's why he's sent to be killed. However, he doesn't die, and when he grows up, by chance, he finds his father. He had a dispute, he kills him, and without knowing that Jocasta, his mother, was his mother, he marries her, and the play is full of events that lead to a revelation of the real identity of each one of the characters. So Oedipus takes his eyes out, he blinds himself, his mother commits suicide. Everything ends in a terrible tragedy, literally, because the revelation is that you cannot escape the fate of the gods. And finally, the third playwright, Euripides, is more skeptical about destiny, about the gods. Euripides is the playwright that talks a tragic sense of life, like in his famous play Medea, but with a twist of disenchantment, of defy against the gods. There are many other plays in which he shows that he had something like of what we would call a contemporary perspective, to doubt the gods, to challenge their designs. These are modern ideas. However, in ancient Greece, they had a place thanks to the development of philosophy and of individual thinking that at that point had been achieved already by philosophers.